It's almost like experiencing your wider connection, feeling these shapes as our wider connection to each other in the universe. And that is the most important thing, because you come away from that, and for some moments afterwards, before the world comes back in and takes it all over again, you feel as part of one. Damn. I mean, I'm glad I decided that's what I wanted to do when I was like 16.
Hey there friends, Jerk here with something a bit different today. I had a chance a few months back to sit down with an old professor of mine whose name is Vinnie Martucci. Vinnie is a jazz piano player, composer, and professor, and someone that I met at SUNY New Paltz in 2014. He has a very interesting way of approaching improvisation and composing that was very much informed by a diverse cast of characters in his own education and career. And I knew that he would have some very insightful anecdotes to offer and just be a good interview subject in general. We talk a bit about Vinnie's musical background, his time at CMS in Woodstock in the 1970s, his band the Dolphins, they were a jazz fusion band that he worked with in the 80s and 90s, his time at New Paltz as a professor, and even some of his more recent projects. I think it's a great interview. I learned a lot conducting it and editing it, and I think you will enjoy it thoroughly. So without further ado, here's my interview with Vinnie Martucci. So you said you grew up in the Boston sort of metro area.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, did you go to Berkeley or?
I did for a little while.
Yeah.
In the mid-70s, I was there for some semesters, I forget how many. To back up a little bit, I first went to college not at Berkeley. Mm-hmm. I went to Colby College in Waterville, Maine, as a biochemistry pre-med major. Yikes. So one of the major jokes, if I was... in any situation I was playing in, I would always like try and play, like make music. Of course. So that ended up with some funny outcomes at weddings, to say the least. So the joke became we'd all be hanging out backstage, like having dinner or something like that. And then one of the band members would turn, actually it was Betty McDonald, she would turn to the bass player, Rob Leon, and go, "Can you imagine this guy as a doctor? You'd come out of surgery with your ears and your forehead and your arms coming out of your legs." And
Yeah, the free-spirited thing translates a bit less in medicine than it does in music.
So, needless to say, it was a good thing that at Colby, I did not stay as a biochemistry major. I found myself going to jam sessions all the time. I was starting to write tunes. Mm-hmm. I was obviously getting pulled. So I left and went to Berkeley for a while and was there for a little bit. There, I studied with some really great professors there, like Tom Pleshek and John Laporta. It was a great era. Dean Earle was my... piano teacher. Ray Santisi was there also. So it was a really good era to be there.
This is like early mid-70s?
Mid-70s.
Sure.
Yeah, mid-70s. I had actually really discovered and committed to jazz, really thinking that this was where I wanted to go in high school before I went to college. I had a blues, funky dance group that used to play high school dances and whatnot. One night after we played a gig, my friend at the time, this great drummer, we came back to his drum cave at his parents' at his parents' house, the basement, with all the Jimi Hendrix Day Glow posters, and he had just gotten this album. It was like a Love Supreme, definitely. And so he put that on and we were listening to it. And I swear to God, we listened to that album from about midnight until 6 a.m, over and over, and just talked about it and listened to it and talked about it and listened to it. And maybe this is in retrospect, what I think happened, but I came away thinking this is, one thing I came away with is I thought we had really played a great set at this high school dance, and I left completely deflated, going wow, this is really, after listening to that classic quartet, I realized, I could make a list of a million things that we were not doing. And it was just like, oh my God, this is really what the music is about. And so on the plus side, I was like, something lit up and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is really what I want to do. So by the time I got to college, I already emotionally and somewhere inside was like, this other stuff is not going to work. I have to be a musician. And so that all came to a head and I went to Boston and studied at Berklee. And then from there I went down towards New York, to Westport, Connecticut, to study with John Mahagan, who had written this 4-volume series of jazz piano books. And my original intention was to go down there to study with Dave Brubeck, but he wasn't available because he's on tour all the time.
Yeah, he seemed like a pretty popular guy at the
exactly.
time, to say the least.
Well, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, totally.
And he recommended that I contact John Mahagan, and I did.
Oh, really?
And I studied with him. And then while I was studying with John Mahagan, he found out that I was like midway through a degree. And interestingly enough, he said, look, you got your whole life in front of you. You can do all this and that and the other thing. Go back and get your degree. Get it in music, get it in whatever you want, but get the degree done out of the way. You're halfway there. Sure. Just do it. So I went back, not to Berklee, but I went back to Colby so that I could study composition with a composer and who was also the conductor for the Portland Symphony in Maine. His name was Peter Ray. And man, with that was, what a brilliant musician, a writer. I just really learned a lot from him, and it was all in the modern. He was an understudy of Paul Hindemith. So,
sure.
So I studied craft of composition with Hindemith's concepts of tonality and harmony with him, and did all these composition exercises. And then when I graduated, I did a combination jazz and composition recital, which was really good because that set the tone for me for the rest of my life, which is like, music comes from wherever it comes from. It doesn't, the labels are really truly in the way. When you get musicians are doing all kinds of different things, and you can call them different styles or whatnot. But at a certain point, when the musicianship really comes to the front for a particular person, they really develop it. It goes like this, and musicians at a certain it's just music at a certain level, and so you can take inspiration from a Bach chorale or a Debussy prelude or recordings, field recordings of blues or wherever music comes from, West African music and chants and gamelan. It really, and we'll come back to CMS, but that's where that all comes from. So anyway, that's where the Boston thing kind of blew and went all over the place.
You started the Dolphins with the Brubeck brothers in the 80s, correct?
Yeah, with Dan Brubeck.
Dan Brubeck, okay. So the fusion is a interesting subgenre, so to speak, within the jazz world that sort of has had like controversy, for lack of a better term, in terms of it created camps, basically, where I think that people said like, oh, Bitches Brew is cool, but there was like we're going no further with this and still calling it jazz for some folks.
Right.
I think about the sort of trad jazz movement in the 90s with folks like Joshua Redman and Vinnie Martucci and that kind of crew. Fusion sort of went by the wayside, not totally, but...
It did I agree, and it did for a number of reasons. Some of it was the internal controversy between musicians. This is jazz, this isn't jazz, which is also matched by the jazz audience, I'll add. There's a this is jazz, this isn't jazz type of thing. But it was also the markets, too. If you talk about Bitches Brew, you can also think about the early weather report.
Yeah. I was listening to Black Market when I was driving up here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect example of it. The early Chick Corea. Tony Williams' Lifetime, even such albums from the late 60s as, is it Joe Farrell, Moon Germs?
Yeah.
Which is electric piano and funky and straight eighth grooves coupled with some time and whatnot. The first explosion of jazz fusion from 69 on through mid-late 70s was very energetic, concert-oriented, jam-type music that had really wide appeal at festivals and whatnot, which is where I came from with it. And I don't want to speak for the other members of the Dolphins, but that's where I came from with it. I just really gravitated with that music. I just thought it was the next thing.
Yeah, of course.
And you had practitioners like, we can't forget Herbie Hancock at the same time, with Headhunters and then and the albums that followed all in that. That was real cutting edge stuff, and it was doing things like saying, wait a minute, what Stevie Wonder is doing over here, what Quincy Jones is doing over there, what Miles Davis is doing over here, and you can situate yourself in this whole area, and then you have the audiences. This is this big story about how at Newport, I think the year before Bitches Brew came out, that Miles stayed and heard Sly's set. Yeah. And he came away from that experience seeing this young audience going completely nuts for this music. And of course, in retrospect, that funk music was definitely, it was a high watermark. It was hitting something. It was doing this kind of thing that music gets to at every, at different points in time. Something crystallizes, sort of like with cars, like the 64 Corvette. You can't improve on that design, or there are things when stuff comes together, and it's worth pursuing, and many groups decided to pursue it. Then that started the internal culture war within jazz. This stuff is electric, it's loud, it's this, it's that. Granted, those things are true, and then it started to happen with the audiences that went to both types of music. You couldn't be into both, which to me, now, even then, sounded crazy.
Yeah.
And now that I'm an old guy, it looks totally crazy. It's like you're denying yourself something because, that's a big attitude. But then there's the business, the marketers and the record labels. They wanted music that people could just go to the supermarket to, or go to the dentist, like dentist drill music, that it could be in the background and could be easily, played. And when you water down any style of music, but my personal experience being a practitioner in, being somebody that played jazz fusion, I was really seeing it firsthand. If you throw a bucket of water on jazz fusion, you get Fusac. It's sort of like in Casablanca. I'm shocked to find out there's gambling going on in this institution. It's like, how many times did this happen? During the swing era, the big band formula became formulaic, so it could be repeated, so that the success could be repeated over and over and over again.
Bossa Nova kind of had the same thing happen in the 60s.
Yeah, these are wonderful forms of music, but when you do a certain thing to it, when you formulize it in order to achieve a certain kind of goal, and then this gets into a whole philosophical argument. Aren't we always on stage trying to communicate? Of course you're guiding your expression to certain outcomes. That doesn't make it some kind of, that certainly isn't some like evil design on being a sellout. If you want to communicate with an audience, you have to use a language to communicate.
Oh, totally, yeah.
But it does get, when you start getting corporations and the music business involved with it, it does get crazy. And jazz fusion, I think, is yet again another example of an object lesson of how it cannot go well. and it didn't go well, and the music kind of went, by the time the late 90s came around, it was like, time to move on, folks.
So you started at New Paltz as a faculty member in the 90s. I think you said you were doing piano lessons.
91, I think, or something like that.
Was that your first, I assume you probably taught like privately at different points in your career.
I actually, oddly enough, from about when I was 18 or 19 on, that's when I started teaching.
Yeah.
Not because I wanted to teach, but I would be in practice rooms at Colby, and I'd be like playing along, and somebody would knock on the door and say, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And I'd be, I don't know, lurking out solo ideas on like Moment's Notice or like some ballad or something like that. Kind of in retrospect, kind of stumbling my way through these things. But somebody would knock on the door and say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, come on in." And then we would talk about it and then hang out, sometimes go jam or do this and that. And so that started a process that kind of planted the seed that it was fun. I kind of liked hanging out with people and talking about it and doing things like that. And then I taught a little bit. I taught privately in Woodstock when we first got there in 1980. After I graduated from college, I went on the road for a bit, and so I wasn't able to teach. And then I taught at Alfred University.
Was that your first like academic gig?
Yeah, I actually had the job that I eventually got at New Paltz.
Oh, really?
And I had it when I was 24 years old. So talk about like not going up the ladder.
Which position?
I was a lecturer in music at Alfred University. I did that for a couple of years while my wife was in art school. And I was kind of like a department gopher. I played for dance classes. I taught piano. I taught a history of jazz course, and I taught a jazz theory course. Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And but eventually I decided I needed to stop because I was only like 2 years older than the people I was teaching, and I really felt like I don't really have anything. I don't have anything real to offer these people yet. I just I need like life experience. This isn't right. And so I stopped, and that's when I ended up at the creative music studio. But then, and then I taught again in Woodstock. And then when the Dolphins took off, I stopped teaching because it was too inconsistent for people. And then when New Paltz started, then I started up again, and then that became a steady stretch that went on for about 30 years. So.
You're probably one of the most singular teachers I've had in terms of your approach.
Is that a good thing?
I know, it's something that I appreciate so much, and in particular, like I found your textbooks recently, and you're the only person that I think you started the first day. You're like, I wrote the textbook. I can print it at Staples or Kinko's or wherever it was.
Right.
Give me $20 for the cost of the printing, which I was like sold at that point because I paid for enough $150 plus textbooks that were.
Which apparently it's only gotten worse. I understand.
But like I still reference your textbook and like different like printouts and things like that you had given us, which are like handwritten and photocopied, a lot of those.
It's funny. At one point I thought, I got to get this all organized, and people have been encouraging me to do this too. And take the printed stuff, and I actually had it done where it's all ready to go, and do it in typeface and with computer generated examples and PDFs, and put it together as like a book. And now I look at the handwritten stuff, and I look and I think about technology where it's at now, and I don't think I'm going to do it now. I think the fact that it's handwritten, that each thing was like, I sat down at a piano or wherever and just, wrote it out, wrote out the examples and this and that. And you can see somebody's handwriting, that this is a completely human activity. It does not involve computers. It doesn't involve AI. It doesn't involve anything other than being in the community, being part of the flow of the thing. And like, being aware of what you're doing and like writing it down. So I don't think I think those handwritten copies are it.
I'm totally for that.
Well, I'm glad you like them.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I wonder, so the thing I appreciated about your book so much is that it's coming from your sort of collection of experiences and things that were kind of passed on to you from other teachers that is distilled into this really like multimodal approach.
Just very quickly,
Sure. Yeah.
people have an idea, audiences and jazz musicians alike, and this is part of the mythical aspect of improvising. It's the myth that's put out there so that people sit in wonder of the spontaneous creation and whatnot. Now, I don't mean to denigrate that, but I have a way of looking at it. It doesn't really matter how somebody acquires something. It's like, whether you went to college or whether you got it on the bandstand or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to learn. What matters is the music, like, again, Karl Berger would put this like the music mind. What matters is the music mind that is behind that. And you have to invest all of yourself in understanding and hearing and emoting from all aspects of your being what you are actually participating in, and I put it that way because we're participants in it, and that's at many different levels. So the whole point of that is that it does require a significant amount of introspection. It also requires a lot of curiosity and willingness to step back and say, look, I really have to hear what's going on. I have to learn to understand this. Mm-hmm. And then also that there's a part inside that we have to cultivate that part inside. Because ultimately that voice is going to be the one that expresses anything. Mm-hmm. So, it's all like, it's all basically like that, but I'm glad to hear you're getting stuff out of it. Also, that basic practice thing is also in part derived from things that I got from creative music. Some of a lot of this soloing and practical methods of understanding the jazz language are things that I got from teachers like Hal Galper and Dave Holland and Baikita Karl. Wonderful musicians, great teachers. Just I was in awe of every minute I sat with these guys. Just like the we are not worthy kind of thing. But then there's this last thing you're saying, like everyone is doing what they're doing, and they're all multifaceted and multi-integrated musicians themselves. But the only way that you can express anything, I think, authentically, is through your history and your direct experience. So those books are really just reflections of what happened over the last 50 years. This is what happened. This is Hindemith is in that book because I studied with at Colby.
It's a continuum,
right?
It's the evolution of thought,
But the key that I think that we all individually bring is in our individual experiences. We say we a light bulb goes off, or ear candy goes off, or a raw emotional experience goes off about the geometry of it all, and you see how Hindemith is directly related to the solo groupings that I studied with Hal Galper, which goes with the influence of, at the time, Dave Holland was talking to me about how he was investigating the music of Bela Bartok in terms of composition, and how that relates to what Baikita Karl was doing in arranging and writing and composing, and that what I was doing as a writer and putting all of that together.
I like to think of it a bit as like a refraction almost, where like we're all receiving the same light, but we're all refracting it differently. We're all picking up on different parts of the spectrum and sort of doing our own thing with it a little bit.
Wow, can I borrow that?
Totally.
I'm going to use it.
The amount of things
context.
I borrowed that you said to me are just like because you're the master of the metaphor, and the food metaphor in particular was like kind of your good thing when we were there.
Yeah, that's my Italian background, man.
Oh yeah,
You know?
I use wherever you go, there you are, which I don't think was yours originally.
No,
but that's
none
like
of them are.
Yeah.
Really. You know, either my grandmother or, she went to Amatella U. So anyway, go ahead.
No worries. So I'm curious about. So you mentioned in particular Hal Galper and Karl Berger quite a bit in this conversation. In terms of like impactful teachers of your own, people that have given you things that went beyond just simply like information that you learned from them, and things that you took as experiences and lived through and sort of like marinated with and ended up putting them back into your own teaching and playing and writing and all that kind of stuff. What particularly about Karl Berger was influential in your pursuits as a teacher, musician, writer?
Well, it's a lot. I mean, with the names that we've talked about: Hal Galper, Dave Holland, Baikita Carroll, John Hagen. And before I get into this, I'll get into Karl in just one sentence. One last thing. This is a business that we're in, or it's a life. That's the business, and the fact that it's a life, I think it's more successful or fulfilling if it's a curious life. So I started pursuing and studying with improvisers and jazz and R&B and different artists, and I went pretty much steadily with just little breaks here and there, but real steadily from when I was 17 till I was 35. So
Studying with folks,
yeah. I mean, I was the annoying, like college student that would be like at the Blue Note or 7th Avenue South, and somebody would get off stage and said, "Man, that was unbelievable. Do you teach?" And I must have taken all kinds of lessons with, all kinds of different people, and this went on until I was about 33, 35, somewhere in there. So it was like, 15, 17 years without a break. Just like, so there's like literally hundreds of people. Which brings me back to Karl Berger and Creative Music Studio. Never has there been such a place. What happened at CMS was, like we were talking earlier, like at a moment in time, things come together. Mm-hmm. And they gel, and then they disperse. And the Creative Music Studio thing was just an amazing experience. I came there in the for the New Year's 1979, 1980 New Year's. New Year's intensive week with Cecil Taylor. So at that point in time, I had never ever studied with someone, or I had heard Cecil Taylor before. I had several of his some of his albums, like Unit Structures and this and that from the, because this is like from the late 60s and whatnot. And there was something about his playing that, just like jazz fusion could really like attract and enrage people, there was a lot that Cecil Taylor's playing did too. But for me, I just heard this amazing pianist that made sound with the piano that nobody else was doing. Mm-hmm. It was really visceral expression, and it was its own language. And that week at Creative Music studying, there were about 40 of us there. everything was dictated. We would all be in a circle, and Cecil Taylor would go to different blocks of people holding horns or percussion instruments or melodicas or whatever we were playing. And he would sing to us what we were supposed to play. So there you go. There's the ear training thing right away.
Yeah,
okay, get it, or sit down, or just play whatever. And so there was the direct, okay, here's the sound. This is the sound you're supposed to make. And he was really good at singing what it was that he wanted to hear. And then we developed all these pieces during the week and then did a concert. Now, that's not really, that's a whole other discussion about what happened with that. But it really turned me on to the idea of CMS. It was like, wait a minute, this is like, heretofore, I was getting a lot of the music experience like we were talking about, of here's the external world of music, and this is what you must do to internalize it, because you don't have it inside here, and it ain't going to happen until you absorb all of this stuff. Now, in its extreme, I do not believe that that's true, because as we were talking before about we can only play our own thought time. That whole idea came to me in the way that I eventually put it together with my students and in my work from being at Creative Music Studio with Karl Berger. They were the basic practice routines that Karl and Ingrid, his wife, did, and these were like regular practice classes in time and in singing. And we would chant things and do body movements, and there were several key areas. He talked about in rhythm, and he would break things down in talking about them into some core ideas that were very, you didn't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. It's like, here's the idea, got it, let's go. And one of them was gamala taki.
Yeah.
So, the whole idea of three, gamala, 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 and then taki. Gamala, gamala, taki, 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 gamala, gamala, taki, 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 gamala, taki, taki, gamala, taki, gamala, taki, gamala, taki, gamala. So the thing we would do is you'd get this stream going, and then we would do these chanting exercises of pitch, and hearing and enveloping ourselves as a group within pitch, doing call and responses in the basic practice. And the emphasis was on, this was a life practice. This is what you did as like a monk. Every morning would do meditations and prayers and ablutions and whatever, and prepare for the day. This is what you did as part of your basic music practice. And they were very much into spiritual practice and Buddhism, and it all tied together, as was Herbie Hancock, and that's a whole other discussion. But engaging in that practice, I decided I needed to get back to Creative Music Studio after doing the Cecil Taylor Intensive, and that's when I left Alfred and came to Woodstock, and lo and behold, I'm still here. But it was really because of Karl and Ingrid and the Creative Music Studio. And there was a whole host of jazz, classical, experimental players, composers, international musicians, Don Cherry, Baba Olatunji, God, I'm so terrible with names, Julius Hemphill, Baikita Carroll, Jimmy Jufrey from, just incredibly amazing players. And then, a bunch of young people like us were like sitting around absorbing this stuff, like, oh my God, what is going on here? And in retrospect, you see things as how unique they actually are. And so Karl, his initial experiences, I think in 1966 or so, 67, playing with Don Cherry around Europe. And this is where the actual circumstances of the band and how it's touring kind of lead to how the band actually functions together. So the way he explained it, I forget who the individual players were, so my apologies for that. But nobody all spoke the same language. So Karl spoke German, Don Cherry spoke English. I think another player only spoke Italian, another player only spoke French or Spanish or whatever. So it was very difficult to communicate, just back and forth like this. And they went, all over Northern Europe and France and whatever, playing these gigs, and they couldn't really communicate about, minute details, which we are so want to do.
Yeah,
we always love yeah, man, when you get to the third bar in measure 76, could you hold that note? And then you turn to the guy and go, that was the solo. That's never happening again. Whereas this band really couldn't do that. They just had to play.
It was all on the bandstand, yeah.
It was all on the bandstand, and it was the energy's flowing and responding and playing in the moment. And of course, Ornette Coleman was all hooked up with that scene, and so Karl and Ingrid decided to come over to New York and be in the U.S. and whatnot. And that led to being in New York, starting to do classes and this and that. And that's when I think Jack DeJohnette and Dave Holland got involved with it. And then later, the host of the other people. In the book over there, you'll see the list is several pages long of all the people that taught there. So having said all that, and the expression of this, really focusing on how do you develop your personal musicianship and language, non-stylistic language, non-labeled. How do you improvise and express yourself as yourself and in a group context, coming from this direction? That's where that really began to emerge from. I began to realize, this is you can't play without this. It's just not possible. I mean, you can internalize the external world where it seems like that's you.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not that player. I mean, I've transcribed a lot, but I don't spend all day transcribing, or I didn't back in those days. It was equally important to be a composer, so I spent as much time, if not more, composing and transcribing and practicing the piano and doing my basic practice, which, by the way, does not require any electricity. It doesn't require a place to be. All you need is you, and to decide to do the basic practice, to consider yourself a monk.
Yeah.
Not, a practicing monk of music. Yeah. And so if you do that, and of course do it with other people, because this is, music is all about the community, then it's going to happen. And creative music was really, big time about that. I wish it had been able to go on forever and ever and ever. But it was really foundational. So
yeah, they do still do some workshops here and there. I believe it's set up as like a 501c3 type of thing, but it really seems like the crux of it was more in the sort of ancient tradition of being a musician.
Yeah, and on those lines, it's very similar to, and in honor of the musician as the tribe's historian or the tribe's storyteller. Which is another thing. We do this because we're storytellers, and and all these things were front and center in the creative, and still are in the creative music experience. And what that does is it provides the space for expression and language to happen that is coming this way, and is new and has not been heard before. And we have to have that. We don't need everybody doing it, but our culture and we as people need artists. When I was at Purchase, I did my graduation thesis on a qualitative interview study of different jazz musicians. So I interviewed Karl Berger and Warren Bernhardt and Jack DeJohnette and all the people I knew in the area. I did about 40 interviews and asked them, where do you think your improvisation and creativity comes from? And that was the only question. And then everybody would talk forever.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
And then it basically, nothing breaks down into binaries, but you can always see one aspect at the macro level of things being binaries. And that basically there are two basic types of artistic souls. One is the consolidator and the other is the innovator. If you force the innovator to be a consolidator that works with established language and figuring out how to put those things together like that's artistic spirit is going to be very frustrated. If you take the consolidator and who looks at language and looks at how to recombine existing languages in different ways, and you make them create from the point of view, no, we've heard that before. Do something completely that nobody's ever done before. That artistic soul is not going to be happy in that. Now, most of us are not either one or the other, but in extreme, I think we have to recognize that, and that ties into the external going to internal, to the soul, and from the soul out into the community, into the world. You have to have both. And different artists are more attuned to being one than the other. And so I think there needs to be ultimate respect for that, cultivation of that, and also the idea that as a teacher, one of your primary obligations is to help your student discover what combination of those two poles are they. Where's that going? How's that going to work out for them? Which goes back to what we were talking earlier.
Yeah.
That's what from the internal spirit and the basic practice thing. That's Karl.
You mentioned something when I came to see the Professors of the Falcon a couple weeks ago. Before the last song, you said something that kind of stuck with me about when we.
I had to go and open my mouth.
No, it was beautiful. You said something about like when we view each other as collaborators.
I was advocating for creativity, and if we see each other as sharing our creator with each other and as collaborators in creation, then we will respect and cherish each other, because we see each other as creators and as from a musician's point of view, as audience and performer at the same time. So, and
that seems to speak to the yin and yang of coming from within and also being amidst all of it. Like it really
exactly.
It's a continuum from all perspectives, where what is established is what I am going to take in, what I'm going to produce is going to become part of what's established, and like vice versa, and it'll just keep continuing as long as humans keep making music and speaking ideas into the world. And
it seems like now we have to make a concerted effort and choice to do that for any number of reasons, capitalism or the way governments are operating now. These binaries continue. One of them is the glass is half full, the glass is half empty. Well, for the soul that sees the glass half full, there seems to be abundance in life, and abundance in opportunity and possibilities. For the person who sees the glass half empty, the world is a constricted and place where we are in danger, we're running out. So there's the binaries, the yin and yang, but there's also the way we feel about the way we see the world, and that's really important. And when the professors were on stage, bringing it back to that moment, now I'm remembering. I opened my app and said a bunch of nonsense. Whatever you do, don't give Vinnie the mic. The band is four really brilliant improvisers, really wonderful musicians that are dedicated to their instruments, dedicated to their creativity, and their share in their playing. We're all collectively composers. And so the intersections, of course, is the ways in which all that works. We share our writing with each other, we share our playing with each other, and we share the outcome of that when the band gets on stage with everybody that's around us. And pretty much it works, it works all the time. Like, we get up on stage and there it goes. Sometimes almost in spite of it. Oh man, I'm 70 years old now. Some days aren't necessarily great days, and then we get up on stage and like pour all that energy out and whatever. And it's amazing that, for a half an hour, 45 minutes, I get off stage, I feel like I'm 22 again. And then all of a sudden, that kind of fades away, and it's like, oh yeah, I got to get in the car and drive, blah, blah, blah. And that all happens. But the fact that we can be so energized by communicating with each other, really also of necessity, but even just by paying attention to what's going on, you notice that your audience gets it. I'll never forget this. We were in Finland. The Dolphins were playing in Finland. We got off stage and everybody was like yelling and screaming and having a great time. And we're playing and all this like fusion is going all over the place. And they're like, people are going nuts. They were really digging it. And then all these people came up at the end of the thing. We're 800 miles from the Arctic Circle, and we're trying to communicate, and nobody speaks English, and I don't speak any Finnish. By the way, the word for hamburger in Finnish is something like 26 letters long or something like that. Yeah. It's a long word to describe this patty of meat. Yeah. So it's like, there's no way I'm going to get that together. And yet, while we were there, for the time that playing happened, the enthusiasm of shared expression happened. Everyone was happy about it. And everybody felt like they could, communicate. That's this thing that music does, that we have to see that it keeps going. Mm-hmm. It is so important, and nothing could be more important now than that expression. And I think instrumental music is especially important in this regard, because it's not telling you, it's not saying anything that is it's not didactic, it's not direct, it's not saying you should believe this or you should do that or you should love this person. It's instrumental, it's abstract, it's shapes moving together, happening in time, coming and going away. It's almost like experiencing your wider connection, feeling these shapes as our wider connection to each other in the universe. And that is the most important thing, because you come away from that, and for some moments afterwards, before the world comes back in and takes it all over again, you feel as part of one. Damn. I mean, I'm glad I decided that's what I wanted to do when I was like 16.
It was all worth it.
Yeah, like what else? I look back on it, I would do this again in a minute. I don't know if it would work out. Maybe the next life would come back and I'm some form of an artist and it's a disaster. And the next life after that, I definitely don't want to do it. But right now, if I had to do this all over again, I would do it.
That seems like a pretty apt place to kind of end the conversation piece of this. I would like to take a chance to just plug the record if you don't mind.
Yeah, do you want to?
Why not? Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, so Intersections from the Professors, Jeff Siegel, Rich Syracuse, Mark Schuba, and Vinnie Martucci. Where can folks find this?
ProfessorsJazz.com. The album is on the Artist Recording Collective. Chris Burnett, who runs the label. It's a wonderful label. They are really committed to the music. Mm-hmm. I couldn't think of a better fit for us than ARC. You can order right now the vinyl, and of course there's a CD, and you can get that from us directly at our website.
Sure.
And there may be some places that it will be marketed, but we're not quite at that stage yet. So just send us a sign up on the website, and we'll be glad to send it to you. And that's it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Cool. And Josh, thank you so much.
If you made it this far into the video, I thank you dearly, and I hope you got some value out of my interview with Vinnie Martucci. Honestly, I would love to do more interviews in the future of what I'm doing here on YouTube. It is a bit more time consuming, so I can't say I'll be doing it as much as my original content, but it is something that I think is really important. I've found that really no single source will ever give you all that you need to know about music, and that collecting different folks' experiences and lessons is a great way of kind of moving forward in your own right. So I would love to get some other voices in the mix, some other people that have gone under the radar for a long time to share their own stories and insight on what it means to improvise, compose, and be a creative musician. If you got some value out of this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or thoughts, leave them in the comments section. And if you want to keep up with what I'm doing here on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, I will be back with a new piece on Substack next week and a video the week to follow. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you very soon.